clicking the report button. There we go. Hi, welcome to the Tools Team workshop. Let me share screen browser. And you can see today what we had planned is no, wait, I'm confused. That's the topic that I wanted to cover. Yeah, okay, sorry. openQA job stability and resiliency, which has a slight relation to a ticket which SUSE tracks internally, which is well of the same name. So that's we had problems in the past. For example, we had multi-machine test problems within SUSE, not on openQA OpenSUSE.org lately. And one of the reasons why that was a problem is because of the IP forwarding on workers was lost, and maybe we will also do lessons learned about it in one of the upcoming sessions. But today I would like well, use that as an opportunity, but discuss with you how you feel in general about the stability in different areas, maybe. And then also discuss ideas about resiliency, how we which is basically keep a low rate of false positives in openQA tests, but also how can you make tests resilient if there are transient problems, let's say something low in infrastructure, or maybe something changes in the system. So anybody would like to start and give their share their experience from last time? Yeah, Jose, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe one of the things that improved a bit is retrying commands. So we have this script retry, and I think like 2 years ago, or even 1 year ago, I don't remember exactly, we started using that in some um, tests that were executing commands that could fail at some point because of whatever reasons. Could be that network was not reachable, or maybe just that the command could fail for some race condition or something. So
Yeah,
we started using this script retry, and I would say that this improved a bit the situation for some of the tests. And yeah, that's just one example of how to improve stability for certain calls, especially if they are doing some curl to the outside, to Google, to GitHub, to whatever external URL, because sometimes they are down 4 seconds. So retrying that for, after 10, 20 seconds to see if the URL is up again, that sometimes helps because
right.
it's something we cannot control. We are doing a, external call. And if this external source is not available, for some uh, short time, it's not bad to retry it. So this is one example of creating
Yeah,
more stability.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's very good. I would say in general, openGate tests often rely on network. I mean, not all are. There are some which are like completely independent, which is perfect because so you don't have that risk of breaking whenever network is involved. You're right. There can be sometimes we're relying on external resources and they're just not available either because they themselves are down or because anything in the path in.
Yeah. One thing I don't like, not that you're showing it on the screen, is this message, the fail message, because when this was introduced, yeah, we were getting this sometimes. What the heck is this? I'm waiting for code, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's fun, but yeah, something like the command fail after X retries would be more comprehensive. But yeah, just details.
Right. Um, Yeah, so all those are optional arguments with good defaults, and I guess many don't know that they can override the message, but they should, um, because that not only helps reviewers understanding the specific step, it also helps to make error unique or unambiguous, so that, for example, something like auto review from the author scripts repo can uniquely identify issues of the same kind if we are looking for one specific error message, and then have that as a regex in tickets, and then any failing openQA tests that are running on openQA OpenSUSE Org as well as openQA SUSE QE that use that functionality, they could be quickly labeled and handled automatically. Right. Uh, Regarding so retry is one big topic overall. So there is script retry, which is helper functionality within the distribution also distribution. There's also talking about SUSE, OpenSUSE. I would like to, sorry, what's the link? Software OpenSUSE.org. There's also a very simple tool, which I also submitted into Tumbleweed, which is simply called retry. A simple tool for retrying command executions in plain POSIX shell. And yep, network failed sometimes is a retry and then it works. So that's retry, which is also used in some cases. So because we showed script retry, let me also show you where that is used. For example, there's the openQA in openQA test distribution. And inside there, basically the same, but just with a different. So this is the install module group. And in the install module group, of course, we do install based with packages. And that means we have network transfer. And that means, like, yep, sometimes it can fail. Just one example here. We have assert script run, which is calling retry. What does it do in retry? It's calling zipper refresh together with zipper in of an openQA package. And that together with refresh in a cycle is executed multiple times. Retry has the additional nice functionality that it has exponential backoff. So, you know, in particular with network, maybe after one failure, you want to immediately retry. If that fails reproducibly, what retry does, it's backing off for longer and longer time, because, you know, if a server is down for, let's say, 5 minutes, there's no sense to retry every couple of seconds. So you can give it a bit slack and still retry, but after a bit prolonged time. Okay, good. Other experiences regarding what can make tests unstable, or then hints or current solutions, or maybe workarounds what are applied to make tests more stable? I can quickly mention that just looking for retry, there's also an openQA built-in functionality, automatic retries of jobs. So you can give openQA jobs the test setting retry, example like that. Retry 2 times. So if there's one failure, then it retries up to 2 times more if a test is still failing. And additionally, it has a description, like reference, if there's bug hash 42, which is the reason why a certain retry is necessary. Compared to the earlier retry, that automatic retries of jobs can be seen as very simple because you don't need to change the test code. Yay. But on the other hand, it's expensive because it's a retry on the level of lead openQA jobs. So, if you have job timeout of overall job run times, range of 2 hours, and if it fails in a very late step, then, well, basically you can double or triple that time until you finally see an error persisting and that gives up. There are also custom scripts. I mentioned auto review. So you can enable custom hook scripts on a job done based. That's what we have for the openQA instances that we maintain, O3 and OSD. And one example being auto review. What auto review does is you put a special comment in your ticket subject, and then from that issue tracker, like the Redmine instance Progress OpenSUSE org, whenever a job in openQA is failing and there's no label carried over or no other means to make sure that there is a proper label or a tag provided on the job, then the issue tracker is queried for reg access, and the reg access then try to match against the complete log file of that openQA job. And if it matches, then it's putting that ticket reference into the comment field of the openQA job. And optionally, you can give a retry parameter, which is then also re-triggering the complete openQA job. There's also additional functionality, but force result, and we had more than one workshop session going into detail about that. So if you want to know more, then I'm referring you to. Can we talk about weight something from the point of view of stability, how to sleep in a test? I do not have experience to share, but I know it could be hard to. Yes, thank you. So that's a good idea. For that, let me take a look with you on the test API description. Many test methods have a timeout. So first, to make tests resilient, sometimes you need to wait a bit longer. If you execute a test like manually once on your powerful workstation, then yeah, maybe it's like you don't realize that it's taking some milliseconds. You would consider an action instance, like you call a command and then you have the result, right? What openQA does is, on one hand, it's re-executing the same test thousands of times. So in some cases, there might be something which is really slowing it down. Let's say the underlying infrastructure network that also mentioned, or maybe there's really something that we consider not really within our control. But also, commonly what's done is you have virtualization involved and many virtual machines running openQA tests in parallel. So yeah, it can be that in this test environment, execution takes a bit longer. So let's take a look. For example, a search screen. Now a search screen has a timeout, and that's an optional parameter because it does have a default timeout of 30 seconds, right? So to make a test resilient, to say like, well, sometimes it can take a bit longer, then of course you can give it a bit long time. What if it can take 10 minutes for a needle to show up? Should you give a timeout of 10 minutes? You can, but 10 minutes is rather long. Often there are intermediate steps, which could be something like exit criteria of that condition. So let's say you're looking at one. I think one good example is the end of the progress notification in the openSUSE installer, right? Let me show you that example real quick. So I guess any of those would work. And if you look it up, then you have this perform installation, and you see that this is taking 4 minutes, 3 seconds. And what you have here is you have the progress bar starting, and then in the end, you have the final step. So this is when everything works, right? But what if the installation aborts somewhere in the middle with an error? For that, what I would consider a good approach, let's see, do you guys know an example where the usual needles are used? Yeah, like here. You can see await install. It's taking about the same time, 3 minutes. That's rather quick, I would say, for installing. Maybe it's not that many packages, which is great. What is done here, it matches on installation started. And then just one more screenshot. And then it's taking a look in a loop for multiple different variants. So this is a nice example of looking for different things that could happen. And reboot now is the one that we want to reach in the success case. All the others are error conditions. Okay, but it's good if those error conditions are here. Unfortunately, there are no needles matching those labels. I don't know what people did there to not care about those, but still keep the labels. But at least there is package retry, right? So you don't need to wait an hour for the reboot now window to not show up when there's already a pop-up asking you like, oh, can I show that? Well, like showing a retry button cannot access installation media. So same as in before, it involves network and there's some internal retry, but if that exhausts, it might still, I mean, consider yourself as a human operator, you might still want to click the retry button. And that's what openQA can do after as short waiting time as necessary. By the way, there's check screen, and check screen has a default timeout of 0 seconds. Initially, it had a longer timeout, and I changed that some years ago to have 0 seconds because check screen was very often used to just waste time. People were using the internal timeout of default 30 seconds, or they were putting a high timer there, and that's without alternatives, and that's often a bad practice because like you're waiting for one exact thing to show up on the screen, and even if it never shows up, then the test wouldn't fail because this is not a certain check screen, so you don't even realize if your test is wasting multiple minutes, wasting time, which by the way, that also plays into testability. I would say that's trying to stabilize tests, but it can also be very detrimental because in the end, tests run very long and then that can cause more issues, and that's also not necessarily considered stable. So I hope that adds one point here. Another is a sleep, which would be something like on a slower level, on a lower level, like, so you execute a command and then afterwards you go to the next step. Consider you enter a command and then afterwards you enter the next, right? If you use commands like assert script run, then that's already implicitly handled because, you know, you can put those commands one after another, but they are ensured to wait for execution to be finished before the next one comes. In some cases, in particular, if you're controlling something like a GUI wizard or something, you want to use different means. And for that, you might want to consider to put a sleep somewhere in between to make it more stable, because if you act too quickly, then you're clicking the wrong button or something. I think there are some cases like a sleep dot one, like 100 milliseconds, which could be useful in a busy waiting loop. But anything higher than that often is not the best choice. That's also mentioned here in Audience History OpenSUSE. If you don't know that, I can recommend you take a look into the contributing document, because that one also has some useful hints regarding coding style. And coding style mentions this section, avoid sleep. Okay. It says do not use sleep or simulate a sleep-like functionality, because this introduces a risk of either unnecessarily wasting time or just shifting race conditions and making them even harder to investigate. So often there is a much better way. For example, if you say like, okay, the test only works with sleep 1 second, and then you run it 1,000 times in openQA, OpenSUSE.org, and there it fails like with 3% in 3% of the cases. Why? Well, because in 3% of the cases, maybe it took 1 second longer and to look for the right thing. And, you know, please use proper synchronization. What do I mean by proper synchronization? Something as simple as a third screen. Okay. And don't assume that a third screen is expensive. Sleep is more expensive than an explicit needle check. I mean, these screenshots with the PNG images, they are tiny, okay? They are not really a problem. If you're writing a new test module and you have a handful of steps, don't just click next, 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 and put something like wait screen change or sleep in between, assuming that this would be the cheaper solution. No, it's not. Just use the interactive mode of openQA to install, create needles once, and then you're good. Now, testability and needles. Who would like to share some thoughts on how needles should be created?
I can share something.
Yep.
Back in the days, 10 years ago, when I was still creating tests, I really liked the console tests because the font never changed and things remained in a constant position.
Yeah.
So it was much easier to maintain than when font config update brought new font renderings and every needle had to be redone.
Right.
So
that, of course, is still true. Yeah, there's one thing which changed since you had been creating tests, which is the much more functionality regarding proper text mode consoles. So you can see the two examples line by line here. There's zipper AR, and you can see that's a needle check, right? And you can see already in the timestamp this trivial needle to just check for that hash is unchanged since 3 years. So it's pretty stable, and there are not that many variants needed. So that just works to detect, are we on a terminal? Yeah, we are. So let's start typing. And then what happens is, well, we use assert script run. So that's also quite okay until we come back to what's looking like the same, but it additionally takes a look that there's really like the console is cleared and you can see that needle is even older. But the next example, zipper what it does is selecting a so-called serial terminal. It does call some helper function, which for sure also does some like script run calls. And zipper call internally also does script run calls. I mean, this test module is great because it looks so simple and easy to understand. It's really speaking nicely what it does. I mean, zipper that's the name. The summary is ensure zipper can refresh repo and enable them if the install medium used. Perfect. Enable install DVD and then call zipper. Right. But what we see as output here, it looks a bit different than needles, but should be still very clear. So, well, we are looking for the login prompt, sure. then we type root and we expect that this is echoed password handling, and then a login. So we are looking for a login prompt, but this way not with a needle, but with a text terminal, and then some commands to initialize the terminal. We're logged in. Call the zipref command. That's the output of zipref. We have zipref again for whatever reason. I don't know. Check the audit log, and we are executing script. The user experience is far from great there. So the people that implemented a serial terminal, they know what they want to use it for. There wasn't much thought into the UX. I mean, that's what you can see. But is it more stable? Yes, sure, it is more stable. And also it is quicker. I mean, compare, of course, it depends on what the things are doing in the past, in the background, but I'm pretty sure you can see it already in runtime. This takes 40 seconds and this takes 7 seconds. It's very significant if you consider how often, in how many tests those modules are called, right?
I guess the output is more immediate. For the other, you need to take screenshots and wait for the right screenshot to appear. And here you get your serial output immediately.
Yeah, but taking the screenshot is also a quick. And what happens here is that we are passing something to the serial to us. I don't know if I'm.
That's a marker to be done.
Yeah, right. There is this unique marker, and we put that to a serial output, and then we parse the serial output. So that's also fine. Where we have to be careful is with the actual typing, because the typing happens over VNC.
Oh yeah, that's the slow part. Okay.
Yeah, and I would say in the past years, what I have seen mostly as a problem with typing over VNC, really in graphical user applications. So not that, not the terminal, but something like the Firefox browser. Because those systems, those applications have more and more functional in the background, especially what they do on the first run. And consider here installation scenario, we have a lot of first runs. So yeah, it can take some seconds until it's able to process your characters. And unfortunately, if you're really careful, you can reproduce that manually. So, it's not like an openQA specific problem. By the way, if we take a look into a generic scenario like this one, which I haven't done in the past weeks or months, let's see if there's anything which pops into the eye. Okay, so there were some incompletes. What were those about? Okay, so a problem with the assets download, a known problem, properly matching. Okay. There was a problem in SSHD, and it looks like this wasn't marked as an issue. So maybe, I assume nobody has taken care of that or planning to take care of that. So what did happen here? We have this failed module. We have this one failed. It says SSH, who am I, failed. I don't think we see the output here. Nope, don't. It says connection refused. That's connection to localhost. And that wasn't working. Why? Maybe that's obvious from the logs. I don't want to go into too much detail. I want to say on a generic level, what is happening here is that this is not an issue which happened in before, right? And if you take a look, the last failure, like legitimate failure, was in Graphics Magic. It has a product bug assigned here, which is resolved, closed meanwhile. I assume it's resolved and the fix has reached Tumbleweed. This is why it doesn't have anymore. So SSHD looks like a new unknown issue, right? And that means if we want, we can take a look into the investigation tab to see, so what's the difference to the last good, which was like the immediate build-in before. There was a change, desktop menu XFCE, that certainly cannot have a relation to failure. There had been no changes in test recorded, so the test distribution didn't change at all. I mean, the build tumbleweed changed, yeah, from 0908 to 0910. So, well, one can take a look into the changelog between those two tumbleweed builds to see if there's anything that could explain it, why SSHD fails. The tests have been running on different machines. I mean, neighboring machines, you can see that many of those parameters are equal. For example, both are the shiny new machines from the Prague 2 data center of SUSE. They're actually both in the same rack. Okay, one is worker 22, one is 24. So there might be some changes in configuration or system load or so, but not really big differences there. And then there's in comments. So what do you see from those comments? Who wants to say what the conclusion should be about the test stability?
All green, so maybe infrastructure issue.
Yeah, so all green, meaning like immediate retry is green. That's good. The last good build is green, so it's very unlikely that, you know, I mentioned a change in the build between that and that. I mean, it could be that now a sporadic issue is appearing with still low probability of hitting, but wasn't there before. So this is why saying no test regression expected, and not triggered good build and test, because it would be the same because there were no changes in the code. So also no product regression expected based on that result. There's a second message from Gikutes saying it passed, so this was likely a sporadic failure. As you said, it could be a problem in the infrastructure, but how could one improve the test? Actually, I doubt that it's anything in the infrastructure, because what this test module tries to do, it tries to connect with SSH to localhost. So it says connection refused. Any thoughts here? If you're Jose, you have your hand raised, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no thoughts about this issue specifically because I'm not familiar with it, but
Yeah.
maybe something like a retry or something could help. I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, I was not thinking any deeper than that. I'm not the expert knowing the test module nor SSHD in that detail to be able to know. I only understand, I mean, it's trying to connect to localhost, right? So
Yeah. But in
probably,
some cases, yeah, if the service was just started and then openQA is issuing the command immediately,
right.
when you are human, you are doing this and there is some delay between commands, but openQA and automation in general is doing this like in milliseconds. So sometimes it happens that you need to wait a bit and yeah, of course, sleep is not a good way to
So
go.
put a sleep one there, right?
Sleep one.
Yeah.
And the other option is just like yeah, we said before, a script retry, and then maybe the second time it works after 1 or 2 seconds. Who knows?
True.
And but yeah, when yeah, I have a question for later in this topic, not for this issue, but for
Right.
the review and
Yeah.
retry.
Right. Andrea.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that because, I mean, if a service reports it started,
Yeah.
it means that it's ready to serve a connection.
Good point.
If it's ready to serve connection, it should be respond to connection. So if a service reports that started and doesn't accept connection, for me it's a bug.
Okay. Right.
Yes and no, because sometimes the you're starting service with systemd and this is calling some scripts which are um, running in the background, so you are not it's not returning anything. So these scripts maybe are initializing some stuff and then you don't know what's going on there, and this might take some seconds. Of course, I agree with you that should be immediate, but sometimes some services just take longer
I
because
know, but probably customers also rely on that automation. So they start a service and try to use the service,
Yeah.
and they have automation in place. So
right, but there is a point. Systemctl start, right? It cannot promise that the service is fully ready depending on what you expect from the application specifically. Maybe the test already designed to look into the log file and grab for a certain the service is fully started message or something. I don't know. Bernard?
Yeah, so there's a way. This notify method in systemd where the service starts, but systemd doesn't count it as started until the service says, okay, now I'm done initializing.
Yeah.
But that has to be coded into the service itself with some notify bindings.
Right.
So it makes it very
Realistically, how many services do this? I mean, the last time that I checked, most promised services don't do this. SSH reported that it started when it's about to start. Same for Nginx, same for Apache, same for FTP servers. They do not wait until all of the interfaces are up because they do not report it back. At least
Yeah.
that's the state as of now.
Phoenix, I know that you understand the specific SSH server issue. You know, you just commented on the bug report at past days. So yeah, but let's say we do everything to ensure that the the test looks fine, right? Should you? Okay, so this is a leading question. I mean, should you report a bug from here, from that one failure?
Yes, absolutely.
Who will fix it?
Probably you.
someone else you create a bug and someone else will fix it.
Right, to someone else. No. Well, if you create a bug here with information like there is this openQA test, it failed once, and since then 30 times in a row it was fine again. Yeah, I mean that's I would say that's also linked to the topic of testability because I mean this test I would say it's unstable, right? But on the other hand, if your hypothesis is there is a valid product issue behind, then I would conduct the counter check. And you say, well, even a sporadic issue can be a product issue, right? How do you reproduce it? That would be the question of the bug assignee, because they would ask you like, okay, I don't want to run this 15 minutes openQA test myself. How can I reproduce it? Maybe the first start point is really you need to run the openQA test 100 times to reproduce if that really leads to results. By the way, regarding that, I have a hint. On the openQA tests wiki, there's a section statistical investigation. I will link it here in meeting chat. That can provide nice results because what you do here is basically a for loop and you trigger a certain test. Like, for example, if you want to reproduce that issue, would trigger that test. Maybe you can tweak the scenario to say, leave out some unnecessary modules and really stop after that SSHD module because there's no point in running other tests just to reproduce that error. But by that, you end up with results which are easily countable. And today's Friday. Over the weekend, normally openQA is a bit bored. So if you have any of those unstable test cases, feel welcome you trigger 100 tests, maybe 1,000 tests for certain cases to find good statistics and to know how often something fails. And that number helps for two distinct tasks. One would be the actual product issue that you suspect. It helps there because then people know like, this is how you can reproduce this. So you need to run it 100 times. How can we make that more likely to? On the other hand, regardless if you consider that a product issue or not, you can try to work around the issue, or in the case of it might just be test instability, fix the issue for good by trying out checks like the multi-level retry or patching the systemd unit file, or maybe probe the port before you try to connect with the SSH, anything like that, and then try out the fixes in a similar way to say, run it 100 times to see, does it significantly reduce the fail rate? Right. Phoenix?
Sorry, one remark in defense of sleep at this point. So everything what Olli said before about that sleep is bad and you should use proper synchronization means is true. However, one observation on the other side of the things, in certain test runs, we use a loop of netcat in order to probe an instance when it is ready to be SSHable. And the result of this one is that the whole openQA log gets really spammed with a lot of those NC calls. And this is annoying when you need to go through the individual steps. So while sleep is in general a very bad idea to do, there are certain corner cases where sleep is, for other reasons, not the worst of all options.
Exactly, and that's exactly what is mentioned in the contributions document. I mean, let me just show you the sleep utility which I mentioned, the retry tool. Okay, it does use sleep, right? And it even with this exponential backoff, it sleeps longer and longer, right? But I would say it starts very slow and with a smart way, because it tells you, at least it tells the people reading the code what you're actually waiting for. You see the retry call on a zipper call, then people reading that know, okay, the zipper call is retried. And of course, between every retry, you wait for something. With the bare sleep, on one hand, it might waste too much time. And in other cases, it might not be obvious to the readers of the code why that sleep there, right?
Yeah. In that other test automation system I wrote, we have a function called wait for, and that just prints one dot for every wait it does. So it doesn't spam the log too much, and it does print what it's waiting for before that, and when it's done waiting.
Yeah, that's great. We what do you have similar? Yeah, no, somewhere else I also did something like that. Wait for or wait until or something like that. By the way, in Bash there's also a function called until, so I can recommend that. Is like the opposite of while. Sometimes I think just put something in POSIX shell while or until. That's easier to read in openQA test than something like script retry. And in many cases, it's also faster. And Phoenix, for the one case that you mentioned, it wouldn't spam the logs, right? If you would, because it would just be one shell call and not multiple shell calls in a loop, isn't it?
It was one of the examples. It was just
Yeah.
It was just to illustrate that sleep in general is a bad idea, but it is not always a bad idea if you have to pick between two not so nice solutions.
Right. So wait for it as a function at benefit. Oh, yeah, that's nice. That's actually again also very similar than the retry. Good. All right. So Jose, I think we can come back to your question now and go from there.
Okay, can you go to the comments tab, please?
Yep.
So in this case, so we can conclude that this seems to be a sporadic issue, and then the previous test is green, the retry is green, and would it make sense that there could be some flag where you activate, you say, please rerun this job because it seems to be sporadic, and just to not block any, factory or maintenance updates,
Yeah.
and wait for a human review and restart, because yeah, what I would do if I see this, I would just restart it. And yeah, probably create a ticket, and if this happens regularly, we need to look into that to fix it, because yeah, that's the goal, and also the goal is to make the code more stable. But
Yep.
in still, I mean, you still do the human work of restarting this job to make the whatever pod happy.
Right.
And would it make sense that this investigate retries the job, the original job as well, and maybe even creating a ticket?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It would. Let's say we have some future plans for that. I really wanted to push for that, but unfortunately, you know what had been disrupting us lately.
Yeah.
There is one tiny step which we could go in that direction already, which is if you have the full 4 jobs, retry, last good build, last good test, and a combination of both, then we can already evaluate if it's very likely a product regression. And instead of this comment, it would tell you very likely a product regression, right? And in case of a product regression, you don't want to retry automatically, right? Because
Exactly.
yeah, you want to be blocked. But that would be a prerequisite. The next step would be to say, can we identify it very clearly as a test regression? And from there, we can then consider like, okay, if it's a test regression, the next step, which we can try to automate, is to also notify it differently. Even go as far as trying to automatically create a ticket in the issue tracker, and then also, if enabled by option or whatever, retrigger automatically, because, well, if it's a false positive, then you want to know about it, you want to be informed, but you don't want that to block the product.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Because it's not a product regression. That's what you want.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, because yeah, so yeah, good that you have the same view, and because I implemented something similar in GitLab for when I was doing review, which is doing exactly this. So, and it's not retrying anything; it's just looking for the history. If it was some crazy logic that I came up with, and if the previous 3 jobs were green, it will retry the job. If it's, and then the next run, if it's green, then we're happy. Then, but if it's failing, then we will have like two failed in a row, and this is like an alarm. And then it was sending me an email, something like this. So, I mean, this was helping me a lot to to avoid doing it manually. But
Right.
of course, it needs improvement. I was not creating a ticket, so. But if we could integrate this here, it would be nice, and with all the nuances that you mentioned. So that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. I see the biggest risk or the biggest challenge in the automatic creation of tickets, because very quickly you can go wrong and then create as hundreds of tickets. Maybe they are all duplicates and false. Maybe they are all valid and legitimate. Like about this issue, right? I don't know if there's a ticket, so I would need to be able to find, look into the issue tracker, take a look for maybe SSHD, but maybe it mentions GNOME or maybe it mentions connection refuse something. So I'm already not exactly sure as a human how I would be able to find and identify such issue. I say in many cases, I can still create a ticket and then let's say the domain experts, the maintainers of this job have from the knowledge of their daily work, they know if such a ticket exists and then can say like, yeah, okay, thank you for the report. Sorry, still a duplicate. That can happen, right? What I see as problematic or questionable is, well, I doubt that actually a ticket about the SSHD exists. Well, and nobody has labeled that job here. Maybe somebody, I could look it up, but it's not important now. I could look up why was that job actually retried. I guess that was a manual reviewer. But did that manual reviewer ensure that somebody's working on improving the test? Or are they, you're so busy trying to fell a tree that you never find the time to sharpen your saw. And this is why you're busy every day to clicking the retrigger button. So you never find the time to prove tests. Okay, Yanis, yeah.
Yeah, but this is one of the problems, right? To retrigger the jobs all the time, and in sense of so in this case, for example, if I see the investigation to gain as it is in this case, I will just post the results. And another thing that I wanted to mention is the needling. That I don't know when was the last time that was a needle cleaning.
A needle cleanup, yeah.
Yeah. And also there is no one's I think knows and use some tags that there are needles for remove some needles when they test log.
Yeah.
You could
True.
mention
You're raising good points. I think those are maybe, well, they can come up in any project. They can very likely come up in any OpenQA project. I think in particular, those are, let's say, problems of scale in the case of OpenQA OpenSUSE.org and OpenQA SUSE QE. OpenQA OpenSUSE.org, I would say, is in a better shape. For openQA SUSE QE, there have been a lot of growth in the past years. And that means that some areas are lacking more and more. And one area, could be something like the ownership of the complete test distribution. We brought that up for discussion multiple times, which then includes something that you mentioned. Cleanup of needles, checking for common warnings, checking for common errors, checking for tickets which affect multiple squads, but nobody follows up. Checking for the unused needle tags, all those things which could improve stability, which could reduce runtime, which could make people more happy. But that's, let's say, a discussion that we should have in another session. Because at this time, we are already at the end. Thank you guys, actually, for a very lively and active discussion. Yeah, I announced that up wrong. So Bernard, I told you that we would talk about the general search functionality. Well, come visit us again next week, because then we will talk about exactly that, the general search functionality in OpenQA, which Liv wanted to lead. So until then, thank you and see you again next time.